a century or two, and after that we have either managed to overcome it or managed to live with it, and then we have moved forward. For example, in the 15th, 16th century, when Europe was discovering the so-called newer worlds, when they discovered Asia, they discovered Africa, they discovered all these places. At that time, the basic question which was affecting the human civilization was, who is most civilized? So it was a question of civilization, whether the Africans are more civilized, who are connected more to nature, whether the Asians are more civilized, who have existed much longer time before Europeans, or are the Europeans more civilized, who were more adventurous and had taken the pains to explore the world and realize that there are a lot many other people than us. So that was a question which was being discovered. That led to obviously a lot of political annexations. That led to a lot of, you could say, questions and lot of infighting between the human races, various human races. And then we came to the part of the 17th and the 18th century, where we had forceful colonization, we had political annexations, and also a revolt to that. So with the revolt we had at that, during those times of the period when people who had been oppressed or who had been colonized realized that they too had a voice. So they realized that if they do not object, then maybe there would be a question of survival. So at that time, human civilization, after having debated about who shall thrive, who is the most civilized, they have moved forward to who shall survive, which race shall survive. And it was at that time we had the American Revolution, the French Revolution. India had begun to realize that, okay, the Europeans the Britishers had colonized us, and we had small pockets of revolution. We had the revolt of 1857. So all these things had begun to happen. And we realized that the question was now which race. It was a question of fight between races, or fight between people, who shall survive or who shall not. After that, we moved forward. We came to 19th century, 20th century, industrial revolution happened, economic dependence happened, also economic awakening happened. It was realized that technical advancement kept on happening. We fought 2 world wars. But even after 2 world wars, the question remained was, who shall thrive? And the question of who shall thrive meant that clearly human beings had established a clear superiority over all other species, and now it was a question of how much the humans could expand. That was the time when humans had begun to believe that, okay, the earth is meant for us, it is meant for our particular it is meant for our particular enhancement. And it was at that time the question became, who shall thrive? So we had we had developed the notion of haves and have-nots. We developed the notion of developed countries and underdeveloped countries. And also, so the question of development, the question of thriving began to be asked at that point of time. Now as we are inching towards the mid of the 21st century, and as we are moving ahead in the 20th century, now the question is, who shall exist after the arrival of the virus? So now whatever new things arrive, either in the form of technology like artificial intelligence, or coronaviruses, or various other forms of things. Now the question is, what or who shall manage to exist after that? So we've actually come back to a full circle of the Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest. And here we are asking, who shall exist or what shall exist after the arrival of newer things, either in the form of technology or as nature keeps evolving. So in this context, I'm going to talk about coronavirus. Now, coronavirus, as we are all aware, it was a small virus which started from the wet market of China. It spread to all over the world. It affected humans. It did not majorly affect other species, despite the condition that it does exist in other species, but it has not affected them. It affects the human species. So coronavirus definitely has done one thing, that it has eradicated the self-proclaimed barriers or differences which the human mind had created. The race difference, the gender difference, the caste difference, all these differences, the country difference, the nationality difference, all these differences have been eradicated by the human mind, by one small virus, and now we have a common enemy which is going to decide our common destiny. all of us at that time are trying to evolve or adapt in some way or the other as the vaccine is being found or researched upon, to realize that whether we shall be able to manage to exist even after the arrival of such viruses or not. Also, another thing that we realize, that it has fortunately managed to show us that how a stethoscope is more important than a gun, how doctor's education is how education is more important than military might. And it has also revealed how the so-called developed nations, which have high GDPs, can crash with a mere virus, just because they had not invested in things which were actually required. So I'm going to now talk about why or how coronavirus, what could have been the causes of coronavirus, and I would try to simplify it to a level that it doesn't become too scientific, or it does not become too technical about it. So we are all aware that 20th century came, we got global warming, we got pollution, we got deforestation. These are something, the new normal, which we had just accepted. I mean, people of my age and even before that, they have grown up listening to this. We have, when we were in class 3rd, 4th, 5th, we had these subjects where environmental degradation, deforestation are normal, common terms which are taught to us. And often as a child, we are kept wondering that if this is happening all around us, what can we do? What can we as an individuals do? However, first I would want to realize that how deforestation can lead to virus. We all know about the carbon footprint. We are all aware about the issue of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, oxygen, lack of oxygen and all that, but I am not going to talk about that. A virus has a different connotation when it comes to the issue of deforestation. What happens is that when you have deforestation, what you do is that you restrict the movement of animals, and also create an environment for them where they interact with each other more than required. In fact, like, if nature had not wanted them to meet so much time, that is why it gave a vast expanse of land, it gave a huge forest, and because of cutting down of forest, what we have created is that a lot of animals are interacting with each other. Either they end up being eaten, or they end up being killed, or something or the other keeps happening, but they're interacting a lot because the forest cover has shrunk. Now, because of the shrinking of this forest cover, what is happening, because of the animal interaction, what is happening is that the microbes which are surviving on one particular kind of animal or on one particular kind of species is getting a chance to swap its places and to explore other species and to explore other places where it can host or become a carrier. So because of this, after these environments, when they interact with humans, either through poaching, or if they interact either through Shweta, I'm seeing a lot of messages about network issue. Am I audible? Hello, Shweta? Shweta, I think I lost you.
We can hear you.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, actually a lot of messages were appearing about network issues, so I thought maybe I'm not audible enough. Yeah, so so what I was saying is that because of this interaction with humans, either we have it through poaching or we have through illegal wildlife markets, what happens is these animals, they become the host of these viruses, and then they impact the humans. Now it depends upon the virus. It is a free choice. We are giving the virus or the pathogen a free choice that it wants to breed on which kind of body it wants to interact with. It wants to affect which kind of body. It may affect animals, it may not affect animals, it may affect humans, it may not affect humans, it may not affect all kinds of humans, or it may affect some kinds of humans. So it clearly depends upon the virus. Second issue is that when we are reducing the forest cover, we are exposing more species to poachers, we are exposing more species to be killed, which means there is a loss of biodiversity. Now, loss of biodiversity, what happens when there is a loss of biodiversity? This impacts that what happens is that only those species which survive, which let's say the Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest begins. And when this happens, that those species survive, those fittest species which survive, they also become the host of pathogens of various other viruses, which may not impact them, but can impact the other species around them. So this is how this is why deforestation is so problematic. It is not just about the oxygen factor. It's not just about the carbon dioxide factor. It is also about this factor that we are actually encouraging more microbes to interact with each other, and then because of that, it is affecting us, and we are completely caught unawares that because we are not aware which virus may affect us at what point of time. Third, global warming has led to the issue of ice melting. And I'm sure you've all heard how Antarctic ice is melting, how we are afraid that if at this rate ice melts, then the water level may rise and can cause problems to a lot of lower inundated areas. That is one issue altogether. The other issue is that when the ice caps melt, a lot of those viruses get exposed to the Earth's surface, which had been lying dormant, especially after years and years, especially after the ice ages. A lot of these viruses had gone dormant. And now, after the ice is thawing out, they are being exposed. So this factor has created a lot of issues, and that is why a lot of more viruses are coming around in the environment, as which are not, and the scientists are not able to keep pace with it, that which one might happen. So right now, because we are witnessing coronavirus, we are saying, okay, there's a virus, but we are not aware that there are a lot of many other viruses which may impact in various different forms, and we are completely unaware about it because of our reckless and mindless deforestation, forest burning. We had Uttarakhand forest fires, we had Amazon forest fires, we had Australian forest fires. So all this is impacting us in totality, but we are unaware about it. Now, the issue is, what can we as an individual do? I mean, I didn't start the Australian forest fire. I didn't even start any forest fire. I do not go and go to the industries and go to the factories or burn or create pollution. What can I as an individual do when I'm suffering because of these conditions? I would suggest, first of all, going vegan. I think PETA has advocated it enough, but going vegan is very important, not just because of the ethical aspect, not just because save animals, save life and all that aspect. It is also important because that will help you to prevent a lot of other factors, a lot of other viruses that can enter into your own system and also the system of others. Now, I have often heard these debates that if everybody goes vegan, in a scenario where 8 billion population of this earth goes vegan, do we have enough food to sustain it? Various researchers have shown that our food crops are not used as food for humans, but they're more used as fodder for animals, which are then used as meat, for the non-vegetarian belt. So this is impacting a lot of people. And so basically food is not being produced to be consumed by humans, but is being produced to be as fodder, as animal fodder, to be consumed by animals so that they can be used as meat. Now that is not happening much in developing countries. I mean, developing countries, as it is, we have enough population. So, and if we are able to give them food, that is going to be a miracle. So that is not happening in developing countries, but in developed countries, this is a major debate where a lot of food is being rampantly wasted, or it is being produced only to feed the farm-bred animals so that they can be used as meat. Second question is, we should use less processed food and go more in for single-use plastic. It is very evident that the more you use the food that is produced locally, the more you eat the food that is produced locally and is not frozen or not processed, that is definitely going to be less harmful as compared to as compared to processed and preserved food, which has been kept with you for quite some time. I think this lockdown did give us a chance to a lot of us people, a lot of us who could explore our cooking options and because of non-availability of a lot of processed foods, we even went in for finding alternatives to it. But I still recommend that we should avoid using a lot of processed food, because although the local food, if we see around, they use fertilizers and all, but still eating local food is much more healthy compared to eating the processed food which we are eating. Secondly, avoidance of single-use plastic. I think enough has been said about it, that plastic is harmful. Single-use plastic is more harmful to the environment, to the other species who are existing in it, and to us. As I say, if you eat something which has eaten plastic, in a way you are consuming plastic. So we should avoid plastic so that less of plastic goes in the environment and does not degrade it. Third, of course, population is an issue for us. It's an issue more for India than for China. And one thing to reduce population is that if we encourage women workforce, because the more a woman is empowered, the more she will have a choice to make a decision about the childbearing issues. And if she can make a decision of an informed decision about it, if she has the power to purse, or if she has, or if she, even if she doesn't want to work, she has she can have a choice to make an informed decision. I think that would be a lot better to reduce the population of the country and in any ways an impact on the environment. Because we need to realize one thing: population is not just an issue because of because of an impact on resources. Population also is a matter that a particular kind of species can only have a particular number around a particular round number figure. If you beyond it, it comes a on centipedes, and nature can be little impacted by it. Like locusts, when they cross their border, when they cross the population, we are having a locust attack right now. If only we had survived, we had taken care of our own birds and bees, the house sparrow, then probably we wouldn't be facing this issue as we are facing it right now. So the higher the species, imagine if we have millions of tigers right now, or billion, or India has 1.2 billion population roughly. If imagine we have 1.2 billion tigers right now, or 1.2 billion lions right now, or dogs right now, I think it would be a really big menace to happen. So nature has this habit that it can only intake a particular number of a particular species, and the more you have, if you exceed that number, then it starts becoming a burden on nature. I think dinosaurs, lots of theories have been taken, but one theory that has been pertinent across all researches is that the dinosaur population was over exceeded, and human beings are also reaching that. But anyways, it's a topic of debate. I mean, we are not very sure what happened to the dinosaur or what will happen to humans. But yes, I believe that if we empower women, then we will definitely give them a choice to make an informed decision about the childbearing issues, and that would definitely have a major dent on the population. Reduction of food waste, as I always say, India produces food and India wastes more food than it produces food. So as an Indians, and as obviously Asians, in fact, Asians have this culture of feeding more than they required. Your moms will feed you more than you require. You feed the guest more than you require. And then we are very comfortable in wasting the food and throwing it. So food wastage, these are very basic things that we could avoid doing. You could also, like for example, the air conditioners that we are using. Nowadays, almost all rooms have air conditioners. And having air conditioners is, you could say, inevitable. I mean, you can't live without air conditioners, especially if you're living in a 48 or a 49 degree temperature. So the only thing that we can do is to keep the temperature from 25 to 28, because that's kind of an optimum body temperature also. Because the lower you go, when you lower the bar, when you lower the temperature like to 16, 18, 20, what happens is the AC air conditioner, it will release more gases which will be more harmful to the earth and the ozone layer. And we have all seen that if we do not touch nature, the nature environment, it kind of rejuvenates quite fast. The ozone layer hole it got healed, a lot of things got healed. So if we had a lot of dolphins who were coming in the Mumbai, in the Arabian Sea, and in various other places, lots of animals had started reclaiming their places. So the only thing is that these are very tiny things, to not waste food, to not to keep the air conditioners to an optimum temperature where it does not create more pollution, to avoid single-use plastic, to empower women, to empower even. And when I say empower women, does not mean that women have to compulsorily work. Even if they are at home, they should have a choice of how many kids they want and how many kids they should be able to rear, and how many kids they should be able to raise. This is something still in a lot of families is not decided by the women, and I think that should make a major impact. Last, I think what we can do actually is we should go solar. We all know Earth has a lot of minerals and fuel, and we have cultivated a lot of minerals and a lot of fuel. We have atomic energy to fuel. These days, the crude price is depressing, but otherwise, the fuel crisis, the mineral crisis, atomic energy, hydroelectricity also we have been using, and comes under renewable energy, but it has its own limitations. So most of the world is still depending upon either coal energy or oil energy or gas, which again is harmful to the environment, even if you use shale gas. So the issue is that we should now stop cultivating the earth, and we should now start cultivating the sky. Now, when I say cultivating the sky, that means that we should go solar and also adopt the wind power. Now, wind power is not very easy for many parts of the nation, because we don't have that much space. We don't have that much of open space. We do not have a lot of wind power requires a certain speed, which not most nations have. But we are a country which is heavily endowed by solar energy. And I mean, even right now, we have a heavy dose of solar energy. So in order to do this, what we can do is that we can go solar. I have myself installed solar panels at my own home, and we have turned from consumers to producers of energy. We don't pay electricity bills anymore. So turning solar, and it is not very costly. I mean, it is a one-time investment, but the government is giving you a lot of subsidies for it. Our Prime Minister has itself argued for at least one solar city in all the at least in every state. So that city is going completely solar, and it's also catering to the needs of the other districts. This move can also impact the farmers, because farmers are often left to the vagaries of nature due to crop erosion, due to soil erosion, due to crop. Sometimes the crop gets damaged due to rain, due to stored lack they on the solar energy, and if we could somehow connect that to the national grid, that would turn them into producers of energy instead of consumers of energy. So instead of giving them energy or giving them electricity for tube wells and all, which they are overutilizing it and depleting the groundwater, what we can do, if they are using the energy of their own land, then maybe they'll use it in a more judicious way and avoid wastage of water, which does sometimes happen due to lack of understanding of the depletion of groundwater. So these are small issues which I feel that we can at least manage at our own micro level and then impact the community as a whole. Now we are all aware. Okay, one thing that I wanted to discuss after this of what we should do is the illegal wildlife trade. I'm sure you're all aware about one thing, that China has a big market of wildlife. Of course, we had this wet market from where this Wuhan wet market from where this corona crisis thing emerged. But what is this wildlife wet market thing? If I explain it in very simple terms, what happens is that China has this culture where they use a lot of body parts of the exotic species in their traditional Chinese medicine. And unlike Ayurveda, the impact of Ayurveda in India, traditional Chinese medicine there has a big market. Allopathic medicines do not have a big market. Traditional Chinese medicine has a big market. And they are known to use the body parts or sometimes the feces or anything of these exotic species to be consumed in their traditional Chinese medicine. India has a major issue because we are neighbors. And the problem here is that, like, for example, I'll take an issue of the tigers. Indian tiger is the most sought after commodity, is one of the most sought after commodity in China, because China is left with farm bred tigers. Now, what happens is that tiger is a wild animal, we all know. Even a class 1 child would know that tiger is a wild animal. But if you start raising them on farms like chicken and cattle, they lose their wilderness. And fortunately, India does not have a tiger farm. So Indian tigers are very sought after, and that is why our tigers, I mean, I'm not saying that is the only reason, but yes, that does impact. I mean, our tigers, Project Tiger, despite Project Tiger, our tigers have not reached to that. The population has not increased as much as we would have wanted. Secondly, you all must have heard the news of Chinese culling down a lot of their pigs because of the corona scare. And soon after that, after the corona scare and after culling down of their own pigs, what has happened here is that Indian pork demand has gone up. And what is happening is that they're all demanding how in the Indian pork is now a big market. It's now becoming a big market in Africa. And when I say in China, and when I say Indian pork market, it does not mean just the pork, the killed animal. It also means the livestock. So the live animal and the killed animal is both becoming a very big market in China. So I think and why is it? I think because they are aware that we are not disturbing the natural instincts of the animal out here. Fortunately, we are not doing much of experiments with the natural instinct of the animal, which is why, as traditional Chinese medicine say, that has a better impact on their medicine. It gets more effective as compared to here. So these are some issues, that this wildlife illegal trade that is happening between the two nations, and no government is bothered about, because we have so many other issues to be bothered about, like the border issues, the economy issues, that we hardly focus on this wildlife trade, and it's happening with the connivance of the local officials of both sides and the local villages of the both sides, and it's very happily happening and nobody's aware of it. So I think these are some of the issues which we need to take care of. And as I'm talking about China, I would like to now talk about another topic, now I'll shift to another part of my discussion, and I'll talk about the international politics aspect of China. Now, what has happened is that after coronavirus, everybody is blaming it. Okay, it is the China virus, it is this, it is that, and we see that China, instead of becoming defensive, which if it would have become defensive would have been another story altogether, which we'll discuss sometime later, has become offensive. And what China is doing is that it tried to use this entire situation to their own advantage. And how are they doing it is something that I would like to discuss in the backdrop of the question that I had raised, that will China lead the post-coronavirus, the global world order? So how is it taking an advantage? Is, first of all, I would like to say, the first aspect is that it is taking the advantage of the emergency of other nations. When coronavirus hit Italy, when it hit Spain, we realized that when it hit both the countries, we heard the news that China is going to supply PPE kits and all the medical supplies to Spain. and it has earned a profit, a huge hefty profit. So China is now doing this, supplying defective, but the worst part is that it's also supplying defective kits to a lot of underdeveloped or developing nations, so that its own market keeps on going. Not only that, it is engaging itself in price gouging. It is engaging itself in bargaining, hefty bargaining, and more. And the worst thing is that even after bargaining, even after price settlements, they are canceling their deals at the last minute, so that the countries are left with no option but to pay more because they are in a situation of emergency. So this is one thing that China is doing. Secondly, it is said that this entire coronavirus situation China is using by going offensive, because we have seen that it suddenly wants to solve all the border issues it has. It has border issues with Taiwan, it has border issues with Hong Kong, it has border issues with South China Sea, it has border issues with India. And suddenly we hear news that China is seen to be taking swift actions at all four levels. Now, a normal international politics person would know that no country would like to solve all of its problems at the same time. So why is China doing this? One theory says that China is trying to deflect the domestic situation, the domestic opposition which it is facing after the coronavirus. The domestic issue, the people are revolting, or not revolting, but they are opposing the government. And to cull that, to reduce that impact, China is taking advantage of the nationalistic sentiment by getting aggressive at the borders. Now, that is a very plausible theory. I would not be denying it, but we need to understand that how is it different in China, or because we are saying that okay, people are coming, they are protesting on social media, they're protesting here, protesting there, and so China is saying okay, let me play the nationalism card. That is not happening there, because if we come in India, your prime minister will be impacted by what you say because you live in a democracy. An American president will be impacted by what they say because they live in a democracy. China does not have that. The general population does not have much of a say in what the president does, even if they are opposing, even if they have social media accounts. That is, the Chinese president will not be much affected by the voices going around in the general population. What can impact the president is the elite circle, the discussions happening in the elite circle. Now we all know China. Now why is that so? We all know that China has a one-party rule. But even in a one-party rule, China is divided into two factions. The Beijing faction, that is called the Tuanpai group, and the Shanghai faction, that is called the Princeling group. So it is now Xi Jinping belongs to the Shanghai group, the Princeling group, and Hu Jintao, the predecessor of Xi Jinping, he belonged to the Tuanpai group. So there is always a kind of tussle of between these two groups about who will take more power. And the elite belong to both the groups. The elite of China are divided into either the Shanghai group or the Beijing group. Now, what has happened is that Xi Jinping came to power in 2012. Let's go back to 2012. In its first round, China has this policy that any one person can be a president for only 2 terms. So Xi Jinping, what he did is he launched an anti-graft campaign. Anti-graft campaign meaning anti-corruption campaign, in which it said that no tigers or flies will be spared. And a lot of its opponents who got involved in this corruption, they were persecuted or they were purged in the name of corruption. And a lot of his opponents were silenced in the name of Xi Jinping, signed the name of corruption, so that he has the whole, he has a strong hold over the government. Come to in his next term, what he passes a law that Xi Jinping shall remain the president for the rest of his term, and the question of he would be abdicating his place for some other person will not happen. So when this happens, now Xi Jinping is aware that obviously there's some simmering unrest among the elite who belong to the Tuanpai group, who were his opponents and who really want that something should happen and he should be toppled over or something should happen. So for that, they need to create a big unrest in China. And coronavirus could have been used as an opportunity. So to prevent that happen, it is possible that China is playing the aggressive nationalism card, and it could, and because of that, because of this aggressive nationalism card, it could deflect the domestic unrest that could have happened. Third is that China wants to shift from its low-end industries to its high-end industries. We are all aware that China has been the manufacturing hub of the world. It has exported a lot of cheap products and in a very low price range. But now China has been, I think for a decade or so, has been investing heavily in the research and development sector. It wants to expand in the high-end technical areas. It calls itself that 2008, China had declared that it belongs to, that this is the coming of the information age, the Xinxi Shirtai. This is the information age of China, and they have been focusing on innovation and R&D at a high scale. They want to expand in AI, they want artificial intelligence, they want to expand in a lot of other aspects. So because this is happening, but also another thing that happens is that China, when it imports its products, the high-end products from other countries which have already been the pioneers in high-end technologies, they often blame China for reverse engineering. What it does is it buys a product, finds out how it was made, and then relaunches a similar product at a low price. So that is why the other countries have raising voice about this, and they are quite wary about it. So because of this aspect, Shweta? Hello?
You record.
Hello?
I can't hear you. Yes, Prachi,
Yeah,
we don't hear you. Yes,
You can't
Prachi.
hear me?
Prachi, we can hear you. You may proceed.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So because of this aspect, a lot of countries are realizing that China now wants to enter this market of high-end technologies, and that is why Japan, USA, Europe, and when I say Europe, I mean Germany and other countries, they are trying to tighten the FDI regulations so that
अरे ऊपर बाएं साइड रिसीट स्क्रीन पर आ रहा है.
So that it does not.
We really request all the participants, please keep your mic muted. It's disturbing our distinguished guest. Please keep your mic muted. Thank you. Yes, Prachi ma'am, please proceed.
Thank you. So this is how so that is why a lot of countries who are already wary of China, they are now following FDI. They're now tightening the FDI regulations so that China does not have an easy entry into the high-end industries. Next, we all know that China. How has China created its soft power image? It has been doling out generous loans, and as I always my various other speeches also, that no matter what China is giving, no matter how generous it is giving, whether through BRI initiatives or through other initiatives, it is giving you a loan. And when China is giving a loan means it has to be repaid. And repayment of loan is not very easy, no matter how generous. So that makes the developing country, in a way, dependent upon China, which China then plays not necessarily in monetary terms, but it can use it for their own advantage. This is unlike India, which has often been giving grants and aids to countries like Nepal and other countries or Bhutan, but it does not give loans. China, no matter how generous, how much, China gives a lot of money, a lot more than what India manages to give. But it gives you loans, and loans mean that it has to be repaid. So these are the few facts, and this is not happening since coronavirus. This has been happening for quite some time. It's a common Chinese policy. So as I say, that China definitely has been using it to its own advantage. It holds the string to the purses of many economies. it is using the trade deficit gap, including India, including USA. It holds the purse to the treasury bonds. It has bought the shares of lots of European countries at throwaway prices. And now it has secured its economic position despite the threat of a looming recession in the entire global world. So but I still think that China should realize that being a manufacturing hub also means that it has to other economies need to recover. They need to be having the purchasing power to buy the economies, to buy the stuff from China that is imported from China. So China also has to help the other economies to recover. But before that to happen, I think other economies have to take an impact, have to learn a lesson and recover on their own. One last thing I want, I know Shweta, time is running out. I think I'll just take 4 minutes or 2 minutes or so.
मैम बहुत साउंड की प्रॉब्लम
issue. The camouflage dragon is rolling out messages based on pro CCP or pro China government messages, so that the dent that has been created on the Chinese soft power image gets reduced. And the market for this, guess what, is nowhere else. The market for this is happening in Bangladesh. So a lot of fake media accounts, if you trace their origin, then they are found in there as being Bangladeshi accounts are being used as in this entire racket or nexus is called this camouflage dragon. So if I could conclude with the question of will China lead the world order, or will there be a China-led world order in the coming future? Then I would say that China definitely wants to lead the world order and it has all the willingness to lead the world order, but it does not have the willpower to lead the world order. Because when you lead, you need to lead by example or not by being an authoritarian boss. And China, because it's so used to being authoritarian, it has not been able to create it will not be able to create an impact where even if it begins to lead a world order, it will not be able to sustain. Secondly, what I feel is that the Western world, America, Europe, and all the other countries, they have in these 2 times, they have managed to you could say create some brilliant institutions of democracy where people have a right to complain, and where people can complain, their voices are heard. And we have the just George Floyd issue right now. So that can only happen in a country like in an open democracy. So even if open democracies are crashing due to the coronavirus, we also have China, which did crash under coronavirus. So clearly, it is not true that which China often proclaims that democracies are weak governments and they cannot give happiness to their people. So when you crash a virus, a pandemic can crash even an authoritarian regime, and it can also crash an open democracy. So that is why I don't think the Western world will so easily give up its power to China and will allow it to yield to lead the world. But yes, there will be a strong, you could say, a shift, a fight for tussle for power as to who will lead the global order. So I think I would like to conclude by here saying that China has now just recently concluded its Made in India, Made in China 2025 program. And I think these are some of the aspects where India could learn from it. We have lots of good policies on paper like Make in India and all, but when it comes to implementation, we don't do it. China just recently concluded its 2 sessions program in which they had 2 goals which they propagated for the world. One was to double the GDP from 2010 to 2020, and second is to eradicate poverty. And the best part is that this they plan to do it by 2025. And the best part is that they have already doubled the GDP, and they have already eradicated 70% of the population. They uplifted it 70% of the population from extreme poverty. So I think in those aspects we should definitely toe the Chinese line and make more efforts to implement what we write on paper. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Hello, Shweta
Yeah.
ma'am. Hello, Shweta ma'am. Ma'am, you are not audible. Shweta ma'am, please check your setting. No, ma'am, we cannot hear you. No. Shweta ma'am, please check your setting.
Am I audible now? Hello.
Yes, Shweta, please. Hello.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yeah, Shweta, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, fine. I will read out some questions and I will start with, yeah. So the first question is by Firdos from Kashmir. Firdos wants to ask that if you see it a common enemy, why we fight it individually? Don't you see and believe that it strengthen nation first approach? Prachi, would you like to take all questions in one go and then answer at the end?
Okay, I'll do that. I'll just note down the
Yeah.
question.
So the next question is by Asha, student of BA B.Ed. Yeah. We still have caste and religion differences, and we are questioning them. I don't know. This question is clear or not to Prachi. The next question is again by Firdaus. How do you see clean environment and COVID-19? Do clean environment have any role in deaths due to COVID-19? Yeah. Another question is by Ashok Nan. He wants to know maximum countries are blaming China for this virus. Will they believe on China after this pandemic in future for further investment, or will they shift their manufacturing hub to India? Another question by Arun Rai. Why India does not impose heavy import duty to Chinese products to encourage foreign trade? Another question is by Dr. Animesh. Thank you, sir, for joining us. How can the world make sure that democracy comes to China? Yeah, I think we should take these questions first, then we can take second round of questions. So, Prachi, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, Shweta, I think I missed a few of your questions. I missed one question by Firdaus, I think, who said that if we have a common enemy.
Yeah, I'll
missed out
just
that part.
read it out. I'll just read it out. Wait for a while. Common enemy question. Yeah, okay.
And that's the first question.
Yeah. I'll just read it out. If you see it a common enemy, why we fight it individually? Don't you see and believe that it strengthens nation first approach? Yeah, that was
Strengthen nation first approach.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think you can go ahead with these set of questions. Yeah.
Okay, I really didn't get this strengthen nation first approach thing, but I see it as a common enemy. I do see coronavirus as a common enemy. Why are we fighting it individually? Is because, as I said, that we are fighting it individually because nations have this problem of not collaborating in a peaceful manner. And if only we had managed to collaborate in a peaceful manner, then maybe we could have better vaccines. But it's not true that there is no collaboration at the scientific level. Scientists are collaborating vaccine. But again, when it comes to market and when it comes to governments, then politics begins, and then we never know will there be a collaboration in even spreading of vaccine to each and every individual who is affected by it. So yes, I do see coronavirus as a common enemy of the entire humanity, and I do believe that yes, we should all the nations should collaborate, should take charge. In fact, China could have taken charge and indulged in proper collaboration instead of browbeating on its charity and playing games otherwise. If China had managed to do that, then maybe it could have led a post corona global world order, and many nations would have happily joined it. Second is, we still have caste and religion differences. We are blaming them. Who? I did not get this question at all. We do have caste and religion differences, but fortunately coronavirus does not discriminate between caste and religion. So anybody who is getting impacted by coronavirus or by this caste or religion virus should definitely get proper medications. Then, does clean environment have any role in prevention of COVID crisis? Clean environment will have a role. I didn't get this question entirely, but yes, clean environment definitely have a role in prevention of various other viruses that are circulating which do not circulate. It's like clean environment is not the medication, or it's not it is the prevention of a problem rather than the cure of the problem. So having a clean environment is good for the health. Otherwise, it boosts your immunity power as an individual, and when it boosts your immunity power, a lot of viruses which are circulating will not impact as badly as corona is impacting right now. Then shifting of manufacturing hub to India, or see, world, even if it wants to shift to India, does India have that capacity to allow the FDI in India without exploiting its own people? India has a problem. That the problem is that we either end up exploiting our own people in the name of FDI, or we end up exploiting our environment in the name of FDI. India has a major lacuna of infrastructure problem. And when I say infrastructure, I do not say cut down trees, destroy villages, destroy land, and then build skyscrapers. When I'm we need an infrastructure, a digital infrastructure. We need to work on a digital infrastructure so that less of the environment is impacted, and we have more issues of other people coming here. We should ensure that they follow the policies, the proper labor laws, international labor laws are properly followed. They feel that and they can exploit the workers or the laborers out there. So I think all these issues need to be sorted out before we allow a lot of mean so that have
Hello, Prachi.
give them a yes.
Your internet connection is poor, I guess.
Yes.
We are having a lot of echo, and the voice is not that clear. Uh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's better if Prachi ma'am off the video and only audio is focused. I think this should help. We may try this.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, there
Is it fine now?
are. Yeah, this is fine now. Yeah, there are some interesting questions, and I'm happy that these are the questions by our students, bright students. One is Sonam Bhati, BA History Honors. She wants to know when we look at history, we notice that after every major historical event like World War or pandemic, etc., the way of living, normal lives of people, working world changes from food, fashion to medicine. So after this pandemic, what kind of a changes we can expect? This is one question. And Prachi, did you get the question? Shall I repeat or I should move to the next question? Hello? Hello? You got the question. Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, you got the
Yeah.
question? Yeah.
Yeah, I got the question.
Yeah, the next question is by student Asha. Is it practically possible to say no to Chinese product? Yeah, this is a dilemma for all of us. Um, the next question is Dr. Prachi, our faculty. She wants to know that coronavirus does not discriminate, of course, but there is definitely caste discrimination in getting access to treatment. Most suffering and dying migrants are from lower caste, especially SCs, isn't it? So this is, I think, a reply also to what you said earlier and a question as well.
I missed this question. I
Yeah,
missed this question.
yeah. Um, yeah. This is a question, Neeraj Rana. Is China our enemy country or it's only part of world geopolitics? Can we hope to work with China and strong power together in the world? Yeah, I think for now, you can take these questions. Yeah, yeah, Prachi, please. I think there is network problem.
Hello?
Yeah, I think Prachi, there's a lot of network problem from your side. I mean, we're not able to hear you properly. You're not audible.
Should I?
No, I mean, it's your voice is breaking. It's not audible completely.
Ma'am, I suggest if everybody just shuts off the video and the audio remains, then maybe there would be better connectivity.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I would request all of you to please mute your audio as well and video as well. I will also off my video. I request same for the everyone. Hello, Prachi. Hello.
Yes, am I audible enough?
Yes, you are audible now. Please carry on.
This has a lot to do with geoeconomics more than geo sanctions we as individuals can do. And if we have products, naturally demand would reduce, and if naturally demand would reduce, the government we are they won't ensure democracy to China. I think the world does not need to ensure democracy to China. It is the Chinese which need to ensure democracy to themselves. We have the Hong Kong issue. If the world really wants to create a dent, then it should support the Hong Kong people, the Hong Kong issue, who are fighting for their basic rights. If really the world wants to ensure, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Shweta?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, because I saw some messages now, no voice, not audible. So, okay. Then what kind of food fashion changes will COVID-19 bring? On a positive note, I want to believe that I hope that whatever food fashion changes happen, we go local, we do not adopt a consumeristic approach, because the fashion industry itself is one of the bigger polluters of this world, because the more the impact of clothes, the clothes also, we are wasting a lot of clothes. So we need to ensure that not and I think that will be a very strong impact of the coronavirus, very positive impact of coronavirus. Secondly, I feel that if we really want to make a dent, we should encourage our local handicrafts, our local MSME sectors. We should stop buying from companies or apps and start buying from local small shopkeepers. That would also not only make a big impact on their income, but would also encourage the local market. So if we really want to make a major impact on food and fashion, I think food and fashion are two areas where the more local we go, the more sustainable we go, we can, as individuals and then as a community as a whole, impact the nation. Then, is it practically possible to say no to Chinese products? Well, it is not practically possible, but it's not totally impossible. It's just that you need to find alternatives to it. You need to first, and the issue that many times you're not even aware whether the product is Chinese or not, because sometimes it is assembled in India, sometimes it is assembled in China. A lot of your iPhones and your AirPods and everything, or phones, everything, if India does not give an alternative, if other countries do not give an alternative, definitely there's some things which we cannot live without. So yes, for example, this seminar or this lecture is happening on Google Meet, which is a US company, or it could have happened on Zoom, which is a Chinese company. So we do not have an Indian alternative to it. I think WebEx, I'm not sure which it belongs to. So this is a problem that Indian entrepreneurs, and Indian venture capitalists, they really need to make a dent. As I say, investment in R&D sector. The more you invest in R&D sector, the better innovations will happen. More innovations will happen, the less you are dependent upon the imported products. Is China our enemy? International politics has a very, very the enemy, because China is your neighbor. But one thing is sure, China is your neighbor. And it is very rare to have good relations with your neighbors, especially when you have border issues with them. So I think instead of focusing on whether China is our enemy or friend, we should focus on our reaction to it. What the problem is that when we respond to China, what we do is we go reactionary instead of being responsive. So we need to adopt a responsive approach to China rather than being reactionary to Chinese antiques. And then maybe we can develop a better and more sound understanding of how we should deal with China. Shweta?
Yeah, Prachi, there is. I'll just take one more question, which is by my colleague, Dr. Shachi. There are a lot of questions actually, but yeah, where did the question go? Wait.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm
Hello?
just, yeah.
Yeah, Prachi ma'am. Hello?
Yes, yes,
Hello?
Shachi, you can ask
Yeah,
your
Shachi.
question.
Yeah. Hi, Prachi. It's really nice that you agreed
Hi,
to
Shachi.
to give a wonderful talk, and especially everyone is so curious about China and this virus. So thanks a lot again.
Thank you so much.
So Prachi, I think it is a right time to ask this question: that what would you like to say about the conspiracy theory? Lots of things are going on, that whether China has made this virus, this and that. So, being a expert in China studies, so this is why I want you to throw some light on this topic, on this conspiracy theory related to COVID-19.
Okay.
Over to
See,
you.
the issue is that whether China created the virus, WHO has gone to research or to investigate question mark right now. So, did China create the virus? Did it not create the virus? A lot of naturalists whom I have spoken to, they say that the level of impact of this virus gives an indication that maybe it was not a natural virus, it was a man-made virus. So, but was China behind it? Also, it is said that the coronavirus is a 5-strain virus, and it has different strains have impacted different areas. For example, the virus that the strain that impacted China has not the same strain has not impacted US. A different strain of the same virus has impacted US. So, did it go from China to US or did it not go there? These are all theories, and also we are not aware that what is actually discovered and how much comes to the media and to the public in the public sphere, how much gets manipulated by the time it reaches the public sphere. So, in terms of this, we Chinese, they still call it the I Ching. That means endemic. They are still not calling it as a pandemic. So what I want to say is that the virus is here to stay. Whether you call it China virus or whether you call it some other kind of virus, it does not impact. The thing is that the virus does not know it belongs to China or US or anything. So we need to now focus on how this situation is going to be exploited by China for its own advantage or by other nations, and how India needs to ensure that its basic sovereignty rights and its basic
Hello, Prachi. Hello, 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 Prachi. Are you there? Hello.
I'm there.
Hello, Shweta ma'am. Prachi ma'am is there, like, but I think her network is problematic.
Yeah, okay.
Prachi ma'am is there. She's showing online.
Yes, I'm there. Am I audible?
Actually,
Yes,
Prachi,
ma'am.
I would say that your voice is cracking, and we are not able. Like a lot of people are not able to hear you properly. So I think we can conclude over here. And what we can do is, I can, we have a feedback form. People can maybe write their questions there, and if possible, I'll try to connect with you, and you know, we'll do some other arrangement because there is a lot of network issue. So I think, are you fine with this?
Yeah,
Should
sure.
we, yeah. So, I would, I would like to, thank Prachi for accepting my invitation. And what she said was, more like self-reflection, I would say, that, we must, there are blame games. People are saying that China did that, this and that. One very important aspect you touched is the, the wet market thing, that, China, it's just not related to, people eating various kind of meats and the stigma related to that. It more than food habit, they're also using it for medicine. First thing. Second thing, apart from that, blaming will not help any one of us. So the point is, constructive steps we must take, and we must learn from each other's experiences. And one very major important thing what has come to, after this talk is, how and why environment is important. Be China, be India, anything happening in Australia or Africa or other parts of the world is also impacting us individually also, and as a country also, and as, in various groups as well. Apart from that, take from it would be that, on political front, how China wants to emerge as global leader, and whether it will or it will not. What, Dr. Prachi said, that, China has all the capability to emerge as a global leader, but then we doubt their intention maybe. And as far as the, various kind of problems are concerned, the major problem which has arose is, the border issue, which is, I think, for common people, that is not a major problem, but for politician, for various kind of people who are not getting affected directly by what is happening, are not taking care of the problems which are, common people are facing. One point is that. Another is that, I started by saying about self-reflection. I would, end by saying that, since most of us over here who have, joined this meeting, are most of us, I'm saying, that we are from social science background, and we must remember the ethos of social scientists, and as a student also, as a teachers also, that how our role becomes very important. I mean, when somebody is making medicine, and definitely people in a medical profession would make a medicine, but as a social scientist, it's our duty that, we always push them to a level, to the point that the medicine is very conveniently available to all of us, irrespective of, any, there shouldn't be any kind of discrimination actually. So as a social scientist, our job is to create awareness. Our job is to make people, who are at policy making level, and, who are making medicines and various kinds of, other mechanical and technical things. As a social scientist, our duty is always to make them realize that things should be done on a, democratic and egalitarian manner. So with that, I would, like to formally thank all of us who have made this session possible. I have already thanked Dr. Prachi. She very generously agreed to my invitation. Thank you very much. Then I would like to thank, my Dean ma'am, Dean of SHSS, School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Sharda University. She was kind enough to, give me approval in a very short span of time. Then our HOD sir. Apart from that, my colleagues who helped me with sort of technical things, I would personally like to thank Dr. Shachi. She's the coordinator as well. I would also like to thank, Prachi Patil ma'am, Komal Berry ma'am. There are other people, actually, I cannot take everybody's name. I would like to thank, I am very happy to tell all of you that almost 80 people were there connected, and they were from various parts of India. They were from Bihar, I am happy to have people from Kashmir, and there were people from, MP, there were people from Banaras Hindu University, there were people from Jawaharlal Nehru University, there were people from, our lovely students from Sharda. So I cannot take all universities' name, but thank you so much, all of us. And I hope we again meet with some topic related to social science and how we can impact in whatever limitations, whatever capabilities we have. I'll end there, and please fill the feedback form, and we will be connected otherwise as well. Thank you so much. I think we can end the meeting.